The French ambassador to Australia learned that his country's $90 billion submarine contract had been cancelled not through diplomatic channels or official notification, but by reading news reports on Twitter. Within hours, France had recalled its ambassadors from both Australia and the United States in an unprecedented diplomatic crisis among allies. But the real shock wasn't felt in Paris. It was felt in Brussels, Berlin, and across European capitals that suddenly realized Britain had made an irreversible strategic choice. London wasn't pivoting toward Europe post-Brexit. Britain was betting its entire defense future on an alliance with Australia and America in the Indo-Pacific, explicitly choosing Pacific partnership over European solidarity. And that choice reveals more about the future of global power than any treaty or summit declaration ever could. Welcome to Doctrine of War, where we analyze the strategic decisions that reshape alliances and redefine great power competition. The AUKUS announcement in September 2021 wasn't just about submarines or technology transfer. It was Britain declaring that its strategic future lies in the Indo-Pacific rather than in deeper European integration, that military partnership with Australia matters more than defense cooperation with France or Germany, and that containing China is more important to British interests than managing Russia or addressing European security challenges. Today we're examining exactly why Britain made this choice, what it reveals about British strategic thinking, and why this decision represents a fundamental break with European assumptions about post-Brexit Britain eventually returning to the European fold. The strategic calculation: why the Indo-Pacific matters more than Europe. To understand why Britain chose Australia over Europe, you need to understand how British strategic planners assess threats and opportunities in the 2020s and beyond. The brutal reality is that Europe, despite its economic size and historical importance, represents a theater where strategic dynamism is limited and where British military power adds relatively little to what already exists. NATO already provides overwhelming conventional military superiority over Russia. European nations collectively spend hundreds of billions on defense, field millions of troops, and possess nuclear weapons through France and Britain. Britain's contribution to European defense is valuable but not decisive. Whether Britain fully integrates its military planning with France and Germany or maintains some distance, European security fundamentally rests on American nuclear guarantee and the collective weight of NATO members. The Indo-Pacific presents a radically different picture. This is where great power competition is actually being contested, where the strategic balance is genuinely uncertain, where British military capability could make meaningful difference, and where the future of global order will be determined. China's military buildup, economic coercion, and territorial aggression in the South China Sea represent challenges that, unlike Russian revanchism in Europe, actually threaten to overturn the international order and create a world where authoritarian powers dictate terms to democracies. And critically, the Indo-Pacific is where Britain can play a role that leverages British strengths: naval power, advanced technology, intelligence capabilities, and alliance management, in ways that European continental defense simply doesn't. Economic logic enhances strategic calculation. Britain's trade increasingly flows to and through the Indo-Pacific. China is simultaneously a vital trading partner and a strategic competitor. India represents enormous economic opportunity. Southeast Asian nations are growing markets for British goods, services, and investment. The sea lanes through which this trade flows, from the Strait of Malacca to the South China Sea to the approaches to Chinese ports, represent British economic lifelines in ways that European land borders never will. A stable, rules-based Indo-Pacific where British goods can move freely and where British companies can operate without coercion is worth far more to British prosperity than marginal improvements in European market access or regulatory alignment. The partnership potential in the Indo-Pacific far exceeds what Europe offers. The United States has made absolutely clear that China is its primary strategic concern and that Indo-Pacific security is the priority theater for American military planning. By aligning with American priorities rather than European preferences, Britain positions itself as an indispensable ally in the contest that actually matters to Washington. This isn't cynical positioning. This is recognizing that American security guarantees and military cooperation are more valuable to Britain than European equivalents, and that earning American trust requires demonstrating that Britain will contribute to American priorities rather than demanding American support for European concerns that Washington views as secondary. Australia specifically offers Britain strategic value that no European nation can match. Australia controls approaches to the South China Sea and Indian Ocean from the south. Australian territory provides bases from which British forces can operate throughout Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific. Australian resources, including rare earths, minerals, and energy, represent reliable supplies that aren't subject to Chinese coercion or disruption. And Australian military capabilities, while not matching larger powers in raw numbers, are sophisticated, professional, and designed specifically for the kinds of operations that Indo-Pacific security requires. Partnership with Australia gives Britain what European nations cannot: a reliable, capable, English-speaking ally positioned exactly where geography matters most for Indo-Pacific power projection. If you're starting to see why AUKUS isn't just about submarines but represents a fundamental British strategic choice to prioritize Indo-Pacific engagement over European integration, you're understanding exactly the kind of analysis that Doctrine of War provides. We examine not just what nations do but why those decisions reveal their actual strategic priorities. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what we're about to show you about Britain's specific frustrations with European defense cooperation explains why London was willing to burn bridges with Paris to secure this Pacific partnership. The nuclear submarine technology transfer is what makes AUKUS unprecedented and what reveals Britain's commitment level. Britain has shared naval nuclear propulsion technology with exactly one nation in its entire history: the United States. The decision to extend this to Australia represents transferring some of Britain's most closely guarded military secrets to a partner that Britain judges as absolutely reliable and strategically aligned for generations. You don't give nuclear submarine technology to nations you have doubts about or partnerships you think might be temporary. This technology transfer is an irreversible strategic marriage that binds Britain and Australia militarily in ways that European defense cooperation never approached. And significantly, Britain made this choice knowing it would infuriate France and complicate European relationships, judging that securing Pacific partnership was worth European diplomatic costs. The timing reveals British frustration with European defense dynamics. For years, Britain has advocated for serious European defense spending increases, realistic threat assessments regarding China, and military capabilities that could actually conduct expeditionary operations beyond European borders. Germany has consistently underinvested in defense despite being Europe's largest economy. France pursues strategic autonomy that often conflicts with NATO and American priorities. European Union defense initiatives emphasize bureaucratic integration and industrial policy over actual fighting capability. Britain looked at European defense cooperation and saw talk without action, institutional politics without operational effectiveness, and strategic myopia that ignored the real threat, China, in favor of manageable threats like Russia and regional instability. AUKUS represents Britain giving up on European defense partnership and instead investing in an alliance with nations that share British threat perceptions, prioritize actual military capability over institutional process, and are willing to make the hard choices and sacrifices necessary for serious defense. Australia is spending massive percentages of GDP on defense modernization. The United States is reorganizing its entire military around Pacific competition. Britain chose to align with that seriousness rather than continuing to argue with European partners who prioritize other concerns. The Brexit context is essential for understanding why Britain felt free to make this choice. While Britain remained in the European Union, prioritizing non-European alliances over European solidarity was diplomatically difficult and politically constrained. Post-Brexit, Britain has no obligation to subordinate British strategic interests to European consensus, no requirement to pretend that European common security and defense policy is actually effective, and no need to maintain comfortable fictions about European-British defense partnership. Brexit liberated Britain to make strategic choices based purely on British interests rather than European sensibilities, and AUKUS is Britain exercising that freedom by explicitly choosing Pacific over Atlantic orientation, technology, industry, and the long-term vision. The submarine program itself reveals what Britain gains from choosing Australia over European partnerships. SS and AUKUS submarines will be designed and built using British nuclear propulsion technology, incorporating Australian requirements and potentially American combat systems, creating an industrial partnership that generates high-value manufacturing jobs in Britain, sustains British naval engineering expertise, and ensures British shipbuilding capability remains world-class for decades. This isn't just selling submarines, this is Britain anchoring its defense industrial future to partnerships that value British technology and are willing to pay premium prices for British expertise. Compare this to European defense industrial cooperation, where France and Germany dominate procurement decisions, where British companies often find themselves shut out of major programs, and where work share gets divided based on political considerations rather than capability. British defense firms looking at European defense programs see limited opportunities and fierce competition from subsidized continental competitors. British defense firms looking at AUKUS see guaranteed work, access to Australian and American markets, and partnerships where British technology leadership is valued rather than resented. The Rolls-Royce nuclear reactor technology that will power Australian submarines represents British engineering excellence that no other nation except America can provide. This isn't commodity defense equipment that anyone can produce. This is cutting-edge technology that takes decades to develop and that only nations with the most advanced nuclear programs can create. By providing this technology to Australia, Britain ensures that Rolls-Royce maintains the engineering teams, manufacturing capabilities, and technical expertise necessary to sustain British nuclear submarine programs. The Australian work doesn't compete with British needs. It complements them by providing additional revenue and larger production runs that keep unit costs manageable and expertise current. The broader defense industrial cooperation between Britain and Australia extends well beyond submarines to include shipbuilding, aerospace, weapons systems, and emerging technologies. BAE Systems, Britain's largest defense contractor, already has substantial operations in Australia and stands to benefit enormously from AUKUS-enabled expansion. British missile technology, radar systems, and electronic warfare equipment equip Australian vessels and aircraft. And future cooperation in areas like hypersonic weapons, artificial intelligence, and cyber warfare create opportunities for British defense firms to access Australian and American programs that European nations might exclude British companies from. The research and development dimension of AUKUS creates trilateral cooperation that advances British technological capabilities beyond what Britain could achieve independently or through European partnerships. The Advanced Capabilities pillar of AUKUS focuses on emerging technologies like quantum computing, artificial intelligence, hypersonic weapons, and autonomous systems. Britain contributes world-class research institutions, Australia contributes funding and operational requirements, and America contributes scale and integration into broader U.S. defense programs. This three-way partnership accelerates technology development in ways that bilateral British-European cooperation simply doesn't match, because European nations are developing similar technologies in competition with Britain rather than in cooperation. The intelligence cooperation that AUKUS formalizes and deepens is built on the Five Eyes foundation that excludes European nations and that represents the most intimate intelligence sharing arrangement in the world. Britain, America, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand share intelligence at levels that NATO allies don't, providing Britain with access to American technical collection capabilities and Australian geographic coverage that are unavailable through European partnerships. AUKUS takes this existing intelligence relationship and extends it into deeper military planning coordination, creating intelligence operations integration that allows the three nations to plan and conduct operations as a unified force rather than as separate entities sharing some information. The operational vision that AUKUS enables is Britain deploying carrier strike groups to the Indo-Pacific, operating from Australian bases, supported by Australian logistics, and conducting combined operations with American and Australian forces against shared threats. This isn't hypothetical. HMS Queen Elizabeth Carrier Strike Group already deployed to the Indo-Pacific in 2021, operating in the South China Sea and demonstrating British willingness to maintain military presence in contested waters. Future deployments will become easier and more effective as UK infrastructure develops, as British personnel become familiar with operating from Australian bases, and as combined tactics and procedures are refined through repeated exercises and operations. The contrast with European operations is stark. When Britain deploys forces to European exercises, they're contributing to multinational operations where command is shared, where doctrine is compromised through committee consensus, where interoperability is limited by lowest common denominator systems, and where strategic purpose is often vague beyond general readiness improvement. When Britain deploys forces to AUKUS operations, they're operating with nations that use similar equipment, share common doctrine, conduct operations in English with no translation required, and have clear strategic purpose, deterring Chinese aggression and maintaining freedom of navigation in contested waters. Long-term demographic and economic trends reinforce why Britain sees a better future in the Pacific than Europe. European populations are aging and often shrinking. European economic growth is anemic. European strategic relevance, outside of managing Russian revanchism, is declining. The Indo-Pacific is where population growth is concentrated, where economic dynamism is highest, where future global GDP will be generated, and where strategic competition will determine international order for the remainder of the 21st century. Britain's choice to prioritize Indo-Pacific partnership over European solidarity is a bet that the future matters more than the past, that growth matters more than tradition, and that aligning with dynamic partners in crucial regions produces better outcomes than maintaining comfortable but strategically empty partnerships with declining powers focused on managing problems rather than shaping futures. The diplomatic freedom that AUKUS provides is equally valuable. European defense cooperation inevitably involves navigating French sensitivities about NATO, German reluctance to acknowledge threats, and Brussels bureaucracy that prioritizes institutional prerogatives over operational effectiveness. AUKUS involves three nations, Britain, Australia, America, who share fundamentally similar strategic cultures, who prioritize effectiveness over process, and who are comfortable making hard decisions without requiring consensus from nations with different threat perceptions. Britain can propose operations, share intelligence, and coordinate strategy with AUKUS partners without the diplomatic theater that European cooperation requires. The message that AUKUS sends to other nations is that Britain is committed to the Indo-Pacific, that Britain values partnerships with nations willing to seriously address the China challenge, and that Britain sees its future as a global power engaged in the world's most strategically important region rather than as a European power focused on continental concerns. This positioning attracts partners. Japan, South Korea, India, and others have all expressed interest in deeper cooperation with AUKUS nations precisely because those nations are demonstrating seriousness about regional security that European powers lack. Britain's choice to prioritize Australia over Europe makes Britain more attractive to other Indo-Pacific partners, creating network effects where initial strategic choice generates additional partnership opportunities. That's today's analysis of the Doctrine of War. If this examination of Britain's strategic choice to prioritize Indo-Pacific partnership over European defense cooperation gave you a new understanding of alliance politics and great power competition, let us know in the comments. Was Britain right to choose Australia over Europe? What does this mean for European security? And if you want more analysis of the strategic choices and defense partnerships reshaping global military power, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're covering the decisions that determine which nations shape the future and which nations become irrelevant to it. Britain's AUKUS choice is ultimately about recognizing that power is shifting, that the strategic center of gravity is moving from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and that nations must choose whether to orient toward where power is going or remain anchored to where power used to be. Europe represents the past, wealthy, comfortable, declining in relative terms, focused on managing existing arrangements rather than shaping new ones. The Indo-Pacific represents the future, dynamic, contested, consequential for global order. Britain looked at both options and chose the future, accepting diplomatic costs in Europe as the price for strategic relevance in Asia. Whether that choice proves wise will be determined over decades, but the choice itself is irrevocable. Britain is now an Indo-Pacific power first and a European power second, and AUKUS is the strategic declaration that makes that priority explicit. Until next time, stay strategic.